Diabetes Connections is brought to you by OneDrop, created for people with diabetes by people who have diabetes. By Real Good Foods, real food you feel good about eating. And by Dexcom. Take control of your diabetes and live life to the fullest with Dexcom.
This is Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
This week, Chris Wilson helps run some of the largest diabetes tech groups on Facebook. It turns out he's also very involved in clinical trials, this one for a new emergency glucagon.
Kind of an interesting experience. They hook you up to IV insulin and push your blood sugar down, I want to say under 50, and then turn off the IV and give you the injection and watch what happens.
Chris tells us more about participating in trials, staying on top of diabetes news, and bowling in sandals. In Tell Me Something Good, a middle school 3D printing class helps out a 9-year-old with type 1, and a running event goes virtual and big. This podcast is not intended as medical advice. If you have those kinds of questions, please contact your healthcare provider. Welcome to another week of the show. I am so glad to have you along. I'm your host, Stacey Sims, and you know we aim to educate and inspire about type 1 diabetes by sharing stories of connection here. How are we doing these days? I got to tell you, I'm having good days and some rough days, I think, like everybody out there. I don't know. I feel like I'm not doing enough, right? I have this weird feeling some days where it's not like I'm not doing enough in my house, which I am not, because we moved to a new house at the beginning of March. I know, great timing. And so when I tell people that, they're like, well, you've had so much time to set things up and get organized. Kind of, yeah, I guess. We haven't really jumped right in and set everything up the way I think we might normally do. We certainly have the time, and many rooms look very nice. Many rooms still have stuff in boxes. Because I don't know, there's some days where I have a lot of urgency and I feel very efficient. And there are some days when I lie on the couch and watch YouTube all day. So I'm trying to be kind to myself, like I always advise everybody else to be. You know, I don't think this is very unusual. There are some people doing amazing things out there. I mean, I don't sew. You know, I'm trying to figure out what I can do. I'm trying to serve the diabetes community, certainly. But, you know, I think we'll find ways to help as we move forward here, certainly in my local community as well. But I was talking to my kids about school. My daughter was concerned about the number of credits she was able to register for. I mean, long story short, like a lot of colleges out there, they're making some changes. They're adjusting. No decisions have been made yet, but the way that people registered for classes changed a little bit. And so she was really concerned about getting the number that she wanted as an incoming sophomore. And I said to her, you know, why? What's the big deal? Because this school year may look totally normal. Everybody may go back to college. Everything's fine. You know, who knows? It may look extremely different. Nobody goes back to college. They continue online learning, or they get there and things change. I mean, who knows what's going to happen this fall? So all we can really do is act like it's going to be, quote, normal, register for the classes that you can, but expect the unexpected and realize that, you know, maybe you'll take some summer classes. Maybe you won't graduate in exactly 4 years, which horrified her. You know, she's a very good student. And I was able to say to her, look, did you have big plans for 2023? You know, she's not on a set schedule, which kind of made her laugh, but also made me realize I've got to be more kind to myself too. I mean, the podcast is not getting out on Tuesdays like clockwork as it has been, and I've very much pride myself on that schedule. But I think it's okay to let these things go, right? I mean, we want to come out of all of this with our mental health as best as it can be. And if that means tonight I need to watch the What's Up With That skit from Saturday Night Live on repeat, because, and if you haven't seen this, I'm not really into Saturday Night Live lately, but I saw the one from home. I laughed so hard at the What's Up With That, and I couldn't believe it was an ongoing sketch. It's so stupid and so funny, and it was just remarkable. And the one with Zach Galifianakis where he's playing the flute, I'll link it up in the show notes. That's how much I laughed, and it's so dumb. Anyway, but if that's what I need to do that night, I'm going to let myself do that. So a long way of saying, I hope you're hanging in there. I hope you're not being too hard on yourself for, you know, when we went into this, we all thought, oh, I'm going to organize my house and I'm going to work out every day. And, you know, there are people doing wonderful things, but it's okay to do ordinary things and be there for each other. and just come out the other side of this with a feeling that we made it through. I keep reminding myself we're doing something important by staying home, right? That's how we're helping. One thing that really has helped me a lot through this is doing some of these live events and chat events and just the Zoom calls. I've been doing a bunch lately. Had a lot of fun last week doing the world's worst diabetes parent meetup. That was amazing. Thank you, Project Blue November, for letting me do that on your page. We had a great group chat with some parents, told our mistake stories, and gave away some books, gave away some Amazon gift cards. I'm doing stuff this week with the College Diabetes Network. And of course, I will be doing the 300th episode taping. As you listen, that will be Wednesday. So I believe this episode is going to be coming out either late Tuesday night or Wednesday morning. So Wednesday, April 29th, I will be live on Facebook answering your questions and talking about the diabetes community in June of 2015, which is when I launched the podcast. Holy cow. So that's the episode 300 taping. Okay. All right. Getting to Chris in just a moment. Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Real Good Foods. And last night, Benny came downstairs and said, hey, do we have any ice cream? And we're at the point of this where we have quite a lot of ice cream. But we didn't have what he wanted. We had like regular, I think my daughter had some Ben and Jerry's. We had some mini ice cream sandwiches, but he wanted the Real Good Foods ice cream that I've talked to you about. And I said, I think maybe there's some in the garage freezer. And he went and looked and there wasn't any left. So I have to order some more. And as I'm looking right now, there is a sale, 20% off on their ice cream. So I've got to get Benny's order today. He really liked the peanut butter. They have the super premium peanut butter chocolate chip ice cream. So delicious. I happen to be a big fan of just the chocolate. And my husband liked the mint chocolate chip. We didn't try the salted caramel last time. I'll have to put an order in for that. This ice cream is so tasty. It's not like a lot of lower carb ice creams, you know, that chalky, kind of chunky weirdness that you can get sometimes. But this is, as they say, a real ice cream experience with real ingredients, low sugar, 200 calories per serving. They list all the ingredients online so you can read everything that goes in it. And of course, when they ship it to you, they ship it in a cooler with dry ice. When we got our first shipment of ice cream, we're in North Carolina. We're in Charlotte where it's already warm. I know it may have just snowed where you live, but it's been beautiful here. And when we got our first shipment, the ice cream is frozen solid. They do such a great job. Free shipping on orders over $50. Just go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Real Good Foods logo. My guest this week is well known to a lot of you who are on Facebook, or maybe his profile picture is. You may not actually know too much about him, and that's why I'm talking to him today. Chris Wilson is one of the admins for two very large closed Facebook groups. We're talking thousands of people in these groups, all about Tandem and Dexcom. Well, if you're not familiar, and I know some people still aren't on Facebook or have left, an admin is somebody who may have created the groups, but is always there to make sure things run smoothly. They can add or remove people, kick you out for bad behavior, that sort of thing. I run two groups on Facebook, and it's a lot of fun, but it can be a lot of work. And Chris always seems like he knows an awful lot of behind the scenes stuff. He doesn't work at Tandem or at Dexcom. He gets asked that a lot. And we also talked about his clinical trial experience. I didn't realize he had so much to say about that. It was very interesting. So here's my interview with Chris Wilson. Chris, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for jumping on to talk to me. I really appreciate it.
Well, thanks for the invite, Stacey.
It's one of those situations where I feel like I know you, because we talk on Facebook all the time and I see your posts and, I read the valuable information you provide. And then I realized as we were recording, as I hit record, I don't really know that much about you at all. I'm not sure I've been less prepared for an interview in a long time. So I appreciate you riding this out with me.
Well, I mean, that's kind of the nature of the online community is we interact with people and, we get to know them at least in one aspect of their lives, but somebody that you've never met in person, never had a chance to sit down and have a drink with or whatever. So,
well, I'm going to start with a very hard-hitting question. I did my research and I looked you up on Facebook, which was very difficult because we're already Facebook friends. But it does say the last time I wore shoes was January 2015. Is that true? And if so, what's with the not wearing shoes?
That is true.
What?
And it just sort of, I wear sandals when I'm outside the house. It just sort of happened by accident. My job doesn't require me to, wear closed-toed shoes or anything. I live in Southern California. On a really cold night in the winter, it might get down into the 40s. There's, no real need to wear closed-toed shoes and insulate one's feet.
All right. Okay. So I have a much better mental picture of your day-to-day life. No closed-toed shoes, no formal wear. You're not going to the office with a briefcase.
Right. I even actually have a pair of custom-made bowling sandals that I use for bowling.
You do not.
I do.
Can you post a picture of that when we air this? Because that just sounds like you never got hurt wearing them?
No.
Oh man, that's funny.
Well, and when I had the idea to do it, because bowling was at that point the only time I was wearing shoes, and I sort of had the idea of, hey, I could, take the sole off of these and turn them into bowling shoes, replace it with a bowling sole. And about half of my friends said, oh, that's awesome. And about the other half said, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah. Well, now that I know you're not getting hurt, I'll refrain from commenting. But on what my initial reaction was. Okay, so we're going to talk bowling. We're going to talk all sorts of stuff. But let's start with diabetes, which is really kind of how, we found each other, certainly. Tell me your story. When were you diagnosed?
I was diagnosed my freshman year of college.
Oh, wow.
I was probably starting to really get the beginnings of symptomatic as I was leaving for college. But, you go away in August, and I went to school 3,000 miles away from my parents on the other side of the country.
Wow.
And so no interaction with them. No, they didn't see me for anything like that. And I started losing weight and, the classic symptoms, thirsty all the time, having to go to the bathroom all the time. But it never crossed my mind that something that it could be diabetes. This lasted all the way until Thanksgiving. I went to go see my grandparents for Thanksgiving. And my grandmother took one look at me and said, there's something not right with you.
Oh.
My grandfather was type 2, so he had a meter. And 2 mornings in a row, they pricked my finger and got readings in the 300s. And I wound up calling the advice nurse for my health insurance and said, hey, what should I do? I'm from California. I'm in D.C. going to school. Right now I'm in Pennsylvania at my grandparents' house. And they said, stop whatever you're doing. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Get yourself to the nearest emergency room. When I got there, actually, the meter wouldn't even read. They had to send my blood to the lab to get a blood sugar reading, and it came back at almost 1,000 milligrams per deciliter. Wow. And I was well into DKA, and the doctors looked at me and they said, we can't explain how you're alive, let alone conscious.
Oh, my gosh.
And so I got to spend a couple of days. They actually sent me to the pediatric ward, even though I was an adult, because that's where all the people that knew type 1 were.
Right.
So I spent a couple of days in the hospital there. My mom flew out to come and collect me, and they taught me how to give myself shots and prick my finger and everything else. And then after that, I went back to school and finished out the semester.
Okay, I have a couple of quick questions for you. Do you remember what it felt like when you got your first dose of insulin? I've heard that that's just an amazing feeling after you've been feeling lousy like that for so long.
Oh, it is. You can almost like feel the ketones leaving your blood.
Wow.
Is sort of the way that I think about it. Almost feel like pins and needles inside as things get really bad. And if it's happening slowly and building up, you don't necessarily feel it acutely. You just sort of build up a tolerance to it. When they started me on the insulin and everything else, it was just like this weight was lifted, and I didn't even realize how bad I had been feeling until I felt better.
Yeah, that's amazing. Obviously not living with diabetes myself, I can't relate to that at all, but I can only imagine how much better you must have felt. But then to go back to college, what was that transition like? Because I assume your mother did not move into your dorm. Oh, no, she may have wanted to.
She did not. She made me tell my roommate and all the other people on my floor what was going on. Some of them were actually like, oh, wow, cool. You get syringes and stuff. It's almost like we're living with a druggie. Lots of joking about it. But at least the first couple of years, actually, it was almost like an extent. I had a really long honeymoon phase.
Oh.
And so I didn't even really need to, I gave myself the insulin and I ate when I was starting to feel hungry or low and didn't really even think about, managing intensely or correctly or the way that we do now. It was just, okay, this happened. We'll deal with it. And,
yeah. And when was this? What year was this, if you don't mind me asking?
This was 1997.
Okay. So this is certainly before CGMs and well before a lot of people even had an insulin pump.
Right. Humalog was, I believe, brand new at the time.
It is wild to think about that stuff. I mean, Lantus had just been approved pediatrically when Benny was diagnosed. We thought, wow, this is so cool. We get to use this new insulin that just got approved. It's amazing when you look back on it. When did you start getting interested in technology? And I say it like this because I assume you are pretty interested since you run these groups now on Facebook.
I didn't pay too much attention to it because for the longest time, I was surviving uninsured. And the over-the-counter R&M, I actually couldn't get to a Walmart. There wasn't a local Walmart. I was getting it from CVS in the basement of the Watergate Hotel, if you believe that.
Oh, really?
That was the local CVS.
Wow.
And that was just, kind of what I knew. I mean, even at that point, anything newer than that, the more modern analogs and stuff like that was just prohibitively expensive without insurance. So I figured that out. I figured out, which meter had the cheapest test strips that I could get, and I didn't test nearly enough. Wound up in DKA and hospitalized briefly once during that time, although not entirely due to the insulin regimen. My parents had come to visit me, and I, being a impetuous college student, got mad at them and decided I was going to go take a road trip. So I hopped in my car and drove to Florida from DC without any insulin. By the time I got back, I was feeling pretty awful and went and checked myself into the ER. I
feel like I want to say something. It's funny, Chris. As a parent, I hold my breath when I hear stories like that. But as someone who's talked to people with diabetes for a long time now, so many people have done things like that. It's just life, and if as you're listening, I could never imagine, things happen, right? Nobody's perfect. So I'm glad you were okay. That is kind of scary though to hear.
Well, I wouldn't do that now.
Of course.
I know a lot better now.
Of course. When were you able to get insurance and then to get, a pump or CGM and everything that you have now? Right back to Chris in just a moment. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by One Drop. And getting diabetes supplies is a pain. Not only the ordering and the picking up, but also the arguing with insurance over what they say you need and what you really need. Make it easy with One Drop. They offer personalized test strip plans. Plus, you get a Bluetooth glucose meter, test strips, lancets, and your very own certified diabetes coach. Subscribe today to get test strips for less than $20 a month delivered right to your door. No prescriptions or copays required. One less thing to worry about. Not that surprising when you learn that the founder of One Drop lives with type 1. They get it. One Drop. Gorgeous gear, supplies delivered to your door, 24/7 access to your certified diabetes coach. Learn more. Go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the One Drop logo. Now back to Chris, talking about when he was able to get coverage for what he really needed.
It was when the ACA went into effect. I had actually looked at insurance options briefly, and the one insurer because I had moved back to California by this time, the one insurer in the state that would even offer me a policy quoted me a premium that exceeded my gross income. Once the ACA went into effect and they couldn't raise the premiums just because I had type 1 diabetes, all of a sudden it became an option. And, we went through the standard of, okay, we're not going to do the regular and the NPH anymore. We're going to get you on Lantus and get you on Humalog. And after trying that and tweaking things here and there and figuring out what worked and what didn't, and they decided that really my basal needs fluctuated so much throughout the day that I needed to be on a pump. Then after I was going through, 10, 15 test strips a day, because I was testing about once an hour, trying to catch the spikes and dips and figuring out where things were. And I was regularly having my blood sugar dip into the 50s and 40s without feeling it. At that point, my endocrinologist looked at me and said, you know what, we should probably put a CGM on you.
Good plan.
And I said, okay, yeah, let's do that.
What did you think when you got on Dexcom?
My first thought was, oh my God, this is amazing. I can actually, see, maybe not quite in real time, but basically close enough, what's going on and where I need to make adjustments to things. The commercials say, make knowledge your superpower. And in a lot of ways, it really is. And that kind of actually dovetails in with my job, because as an IT consultant, I do a lot of working with data and data analysis and stuff like that. And actually having enough data to be able to analyze it and then make changes based on it was almost a perfect fit.
So how do you get from being, a regular guy who works for yourself and you're on a pump and you're on a CGM, taking care of yourself, you're doing well, to suddenly having thousands of people in these Facebook groups? Were you a big Facebook guy from the beginning?
Well, I've actually been on Facebook basically since there was a Facebook. I was in college and we were, I want to say, the fourth or fifth school to get Facebook. Number one was obviously Harvard. Stanford was second, and then they started expanding to other schools.
And where did you go to college? I don't know that you said
it was George Washington University in DC.
That's funny. I mean, I got on in 2008, which I thought was really early. There's no record of that because, long story short, I messed up my Facebook when I left my old job at the radio station and went from like a friend to a pub, whatever I did. I messed it all up. But I was on in 2008, and I thought that was early. But oh my gosh, you've been there really since the beginning.
Yeah, I want to say it was like 2001 or 2.
When it was the Facebook.
When it was the Facebook. My endocrinologist actually had encouraged me to, when I was even just starting to research pumps and then the CGMs and the other things, I was encouraged to go online, find user groups, do some research. So I joined initially the Tandem T-Slim pump group. And as I got better at using it and more familiar with it and figuring out how things worked and at least the best way to do things for me, I started answering more and more questions. After a few months of that, I think one of the original admins of the group asked me if I would be willing to help out with adminning and, making sure people didn't do things that violated the rules and answering questions and stepping in when incorrect information was given out and that sort of thing. So that happened. And not too long after that happened, then when the G5 came out, one of the admins of that tandem group started the G5 CGM users group. She sort of tapped me to come in and help out with that. So that's sort of how I wound up there. I mean, both of the groups have grown significantly since then. It used to be that we, let anybody post whatever they wanted pretty much. That's, had to be clamped down on somewhat just to keep things orderly.
What are some things that people should know about Facebook groups? Like, is there anything that's kind of behind the scenes stuff that would help us either post better or use them better, or that just drive admins crazy?
One of the big things that gets me, at least, is Facebook is not Twitter. There's no character limit. You don't have to cram whatever question it is that you're asking or describe the situation in 140 or 280 characters or less. By all means, use lots of words. Be as descriptive as possible, because sometimes in there's a little kernel or a little nugget that gives away what the actual source of the problem the person's having is.
The other thing that was really interesting, we saw this so much with Control IQ when it first came out, was people don't search the group to see if their question has already been answered. I run 2 smaller groups, and they're usually really great, but that's got to drive you crazy.
It used to. I'll be honest. It drives me crazy less because I've just kind of learned to shrug it off. In large part, it's a function of just the way that Facebook's algorithms and ranking and the way that it orders the posts that people see works. Facebook's always trying to get the most recent stuff up at the top, or the stuff that it thinks you might be most interested in based on stuff that you've interacted with in the past. And there's, I'm sure, tons and tons of algorithms and things that go into deciding what you see and when. And it's not even intuitive, especially looking at it on a phone or on a tablet versus on the desktop website, there's even really a search the group option in a lot of cases. And there are tons and tons of people that do search. That's one thing. But the people that do search almost never actually post a question because they can find their answers by searching the group. So those aren't the people that we frequently interact with. It's, and you wind up seeing somebody post a lot because they've never realized that there's a search function.
Good point. So when Control IQ came out, and this is particular to the Tandem group, like hundreds of people, thousands of people, it seemed like, came into that group. Was it that many, or is it just, I'm sitting on the outside. Was it really that many people?
I want to say, because the group's kind of, had a long, steady growth. But I want to say for especially that few months when it was approved and not yet released, and then right after it was starting to roll out, there was definitely a spike in interest. We were seeing the group grow at almost 3 times the rate that it had been before that.
Wow. So if you don't mind, let me ask you about your experience with Control IQ, because there's still, certainly a lot of people who have Tandem who haven't tried it yet. And there's a lot of people who listen who haven't switched over to it. You posted a lot of, you very publicly posted about your experience. How's it going now?
It's still going along okay. I've actually backed off because, of course, when it was new, I'm paying attention to it all the time.
Right. Yeah.
I'm looking at it. I want to see what it's doing. I want to see why, see if I can figure out why it's deciding to do what it's doing right now. Now I've gotten to the point where I trust it enough that I frequently just let it go. And sometimes that means that I don't catch or foresee something that I would have otherwise. So my time in range has dropped back down a little bit from where it was. I'm not running, 95, 97, 98% time in range. It's closer to being in the low 90s still. But
slacker.
In all honesty, the low 90s is fine. And my average blood sugar has come down significantly. And the biggest thing that I was anticipating getting help with from it, I'm still getting help, which was dawn phenomenon. I'm still seeing that improvement. I'm not, as a general rule, waking up at 180 or 200, even though my basal rate doubles before I wake up.
Wow.
It's still definitely helping. And I've kind of decided I'm going to let it go and try to be a normal user, not someone who's focused on it all the time, and sort of see how that rides out.
I think that almost in a way it's better. I think that, and I have, because I have a 15-year-old son who is very responsible. I mean, I don't want to put him, it's going to sound like I'm putting him down. I'm not. He's very responsible. But truly, being a person who really would prefer to never touch his pump again has helped him so much, because I know people who overreact to everything and they're not doing as well with Control IQ. He boluses for food and then leaves it alone. And, 4 or 5 hours later, he'll be like, oh, yeah, it's good. He doesn't, and I'm not checking him as much as I used to because he's a teenager. But it's amazing when you let it do its thing. If your settings are right, which is a whole other story, it really works out great. So, we'll see how it goes for you. But I think that, anything you can do to think less about diabetes is also very nice.
That's right. It gives you, more time to think about the other things in your life.
So let's talk about other things in your life. So you bowl. You're an IT guy. You work for yourself. There's some surfing stuff in your bio. Do you surf, or is that a company that you work with?
It's primarily, my biggest client is a nonprofit organization that focuses on oceans, waves, and beaches, and that includes access for recreation. So there's a lot of surfing related stuff there. I can surf. I have surfed. I'll be honest, wearing a pump and CGM is not necessarily conducive to being out in the water recreating. I would need to figure out some sort of untethered regimen or something if I wanted to do it regularly. I can at least paddle out and catch a wave or two and not get tossed around too much. But actually, the big surfing thing comes from my dad.
Oh,
my dad, who's now in his 70s, started surfing when he was 15 or 16, and still goes out and surfs usually 2 or 3 times a week, at least when he can, when we're not all under house arrest.
Yeah. Oh, that's great, though. That's really cool. Do they live nearby?
They do. They live about a mile and a half from me.
Oh, that's great. So how is everybody doing? I don't know exactly when this will air, but I assume it will not be at a time when we're all running around outside yet. So how are you holding up?
We're all doing okay. The nature of my job is such that I can largely work from home most of the time anyway. That hasn't been a huge impact for me. My parents have figured out Netflix and Zoom and DoorDash. And so they're adjusting to their new restrictions, although they still do get out and walk around and make sure they get their exercise in as well. So,
well, who knows what it's all going to look like on the other side of this. So we'll just do what we can. But one of the questions that I've seen you answer in the groups, and I want to talk about is, people sometimes think you work for Tandem or you work for Dexcom, and you don't, but you get a lot of really good information. Can you talk to us about what you do? How can lay people stay up on information from these companies? Because it's all public, I assume, the things that you're looking into.
It is. None of it's a secret. It's just a lot of it isn't well publicized. I pay attention to every press release that the companies put out. I have one of the stock tracking apps, and I have it set up to notify me whenever any of the companies on my list put out a press release. And it's not just Dexcom and Tandem. It's Insulet for the Omnipod, Medtronic, Senseonics, basically almost anybody in the diabetes space. I try to at least keep up with what they're doing. I listen to the conference calls that they have for investors.
I salute you, because I have been on some of those conference calls, and they are so boring. But they have great information, but they are a slog sometimes.
They can be, most definitely. And if it doesn't work out schedule-wise that I'm able to listen to the call, honestly, sometimes I prefer to go back through and read the transcript after it's done. There's that. I follow the diabetes media. I read everything that gets put, just about everything that gets posted on Diabetes Mine or Diatribe or any of the other publications that sort of track what's going on in the diabetes world. And while I do have some friends that do work for those companies living in San Diego or near San Diego, where they're headquartered, it's kind of inevitable. But they don't share any inside info with me or anything else. It's just a matter of really paying attention.
I'm curious why you do that. What is it that makes you so interested? Obviously, you have diabetes, you wear the technology, but most people don't follow it that closely.
I think part of it's just sort of the way that I was brought up. I have sort of the engineering bent and that goes again with the job. But, I like looking at things and taking them apart and figuring out how they work and how they're put together. And that's not necessarily always an option with diabetes technology, although obviously the We Are Not Waiting, the CGM, and the Crowd group has done a lot with reverse engineering what goes into these devices and how they're communicating with the radio signals and figuring out ways to sort of hijack some of that to use for their own purposes in ways that the tech wasn't necessarily originally designed to be used. But I've got some of that same sort of inquisitiveness about how things work. I mean, I remember when I was 8 years old, I took apart my mother's computer that she had at home to install an expansion card so that I could attach a joystick to it to play games. And I remember being told that, man, when you put that back together, if it doesn't work, you're not getting your allowance for the next 4 years.
And you were 8 and it worked?
And I was about 8 and it worked. I was safe there.
That's funny. But that says a lot, right? About being curious, about, having a knack for things. And for having there's something different about people who take a look at technology and say, I can do that. It's like you said, that like the Night Scout people and the DIY crowd, to be able to look at something and have the confidence or just even the curiosity to say, we can make this better. I think that's really admirable. I don't have that. There's no doubt.
Well,
I'm scared of it.
Well, a lot of it just comes down to looking at what is the data is that's going into it. Looking at what the actions are that are coming out of it and figuring out what must be happening in between those, because you don't necessarily have any insight as to exactly what the system is doing. But if you input a 2 and it gives you a 4, and then you input a 4 and it gives you an 8, and you input an 8 and it gives you a 16, it's probably just taking whatever the input is and multiplying it by 2 and giving you the answer.
When you look at the technology, and I know that, who knows exactly what timelines are going to look like after this situation that we're all in right now, what's coming that excites you down the road for diabetes technology? Because there's a lot that's on the horizon.
I think the biggest thing that I see, and it's actually sort of already here, is the option to be able to infuse multiple hormones, both insulin and glucagon. Now that we actually do have a shelf-stable liquid glucagon on the market, that being the Gvoke from Xeris, I would assume that Zealand's product isn't too far behind that, since that's what's being used for the iLet with Beta Bionics. So we should have two options before too much longer, hopefully. Just having the ability to not just take your foot off the gas, so to speak, but actually be able to apply the brakes is, I think, going to be a major thing. And then going along with that, and something that I haven't really seen talked about too much, is Lilly's faster Humalog. Which, I mean, that's one of the big challenges, is always that food is fast and insulin is slow. And so anything that can be done to speed up the insulin action to get it closer to what you would actually see happen naturally when your pancreas dumps that insulin straight into your veins, I think going to be a big improvement.
You mentioned Gvoke. Did I read you were in one of the trials? Did you talk about that at some point?
I did. I've discussed it. From time to time, I do various clinical trials as they pop up. A lot of the research gets done here in San Diego, and if nothing else, it's an option to get paid for having diabetes, which is nice to have happen every once in a while. I did participate in the phase 3 clinical trial for the Gvoke, where they actually compared it to the standard glucagon kit to prove that it was of equivalent efficacy. That was kind of an interesting experience. They hook you up to IV insulin and push your blood sugar down, I want to say under 50, and then turn off the IV and give you the injection and watch what happens. And the sort of the cool thing was that they actually didn't make me take off my CGM when I was doing it. So I saved and screenshotted the data from the days that I did both the traditional glucagon kit and then the product that they were testing, this Gvoke, to be able to look at and sort of compare the two. But doing that kind of stuff, and I also did the G6 clinical trial, proving that it was good for 10 days if you wore it, and also that it would block at least up to a certain dose of Tylenol.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize you were in that trial too. Did they give you a bunch of Tylenol?
It was 1,000 milligram pill of acetaminophen. They had us all, I want to say it was, 15-ish people, and all basically crammed into a clinic room, IVs in so that they could do blood draws every 5 or 15 minutes, depending on what stage we were in of the testing. And they were running them through the lab grade glucose meters right there in front of us and comparing the readings from the CGMs, because we were all wearing both a G5 and a G6 so they could compare the two.
That's wild. And
it was basically controlled chaos for about 6 hours while they did it.
Yeah, I've signed up, Benny, for a few, to get into some clinical trials. But here in Charlotte, North Carolina, we really don't have the access. We could drive to Virginia sometimes. Sometimes there's some stuff in the Raleigh area, the Research Triangle. And the pediatric ones are hard anyway, but we'd love to do one. That's really interesting. I'm going to tell them about that. 1,000 milligrams of Tylenol in one pill. Boy.
Which actually isn't too much more than the extra strength, the normal extra strength Tylenol. So.
Oh, wow. I thought it was like 200 milligrams in one, and then so it would be 5, but I didn't think about the extra strength. My goodness.
Well, if nothing else, I mean, the clinical trials also give you a chance to have testing done that nobody would ever pay for as a normal patient. They're looking at all kinds of stuff. I've done at various stages of research trials for other things where they're looking at measuring your resting metabolic rate. And they've actually got a giant plastic hood that they put over your head to measure how much oxygen is going in and CO2 is coming out. And based on that, they can calculate how fast your normal metabolism is running. And they'll do it under various conditions they're running extra insulin into you and extra sugar to counteract that insulin in an IV. Under normal circumstances, I would never do, I think it was a 100 gram of carbohydrate challenge to see what would happen. But I did a trial where they did it before and then after giving the medication that they were experimenting with to see what the difference was. How high did your blood sugar peak? How fast did it come down? Nobody would ever do that. They're laying in the bed and they're periodically doing blood draws, and you've got your CGM on and you can see exactly how your body responds to the various things. And it was actually kind of cool because if I had not done that trial, I would not believe that insulin lasted 5 hours in my body.
Oh, yeah.
But because I did that, I've now actually got documented proof that I can show that, no, like, here's where I had the 100 grams of carbs and gave myself the bolus of insulin. And I can then watch as the blood sugar slowly comes down and tails off. And that was 6 hours of measurements.
Well, I don't want to brag, but I know some teenagers with type 1 who could take the 100 carb challenge and show you how to do it. They would, all kidding aside, you know that insulin lasts for that long because if you get nervous in the middle of that quote challenge and try to give more, you're going to crash. So it really is fascinating to see. That's wild.
So, but I mean, all that kind of stuff is things that nobody would ever pay to actually have that done in a clinic. Right. There would be no reason outside of research to do that. And yet it's information that's still valuable to you as the patient to know.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for spending some time with me. It's so much fun to get to know you. And, I should say also we've done some Zoom calls with the group that you've been in, and it's just been great to see you off of Facebook. So thanks for spending some time with me.
Of course. Thanks for the invite. And hopefully I'll make another one of those Zoom calls before too long.
You're listening to Diabetes Connections with Stacey Sims.
Chris sent me a photo of the bowling shoes, the bowling sandals. So I will post that in the Facebook group. I cannot believe someone would bowl in sandals, but hey, he did, and he sent me the picture. So I'll pass that along to you. I'm really thrilled to have talked to him. He's a great guy, and he knows so much. I would stay tuned in those groups because April 30th is the tandem call. I believe there's some other calls coming right around this time as you're listening. If you're listening live when this episode first airs, that's just tomorrow or the next day. So I'm sure Chris will be all over that. Up next, Tell Me Something Good. But first, Diabetes Connections is brought to you by Dexcom. And we loved Basal IQ so much that I wasn't sure, you hear these great things about Control IQ, and I had talked to people in the clinical trials, but Basal IQ worked really well for us. Wow. When we switched to Control IQ, that's the Dexcom G6 tandem pump software program, we are doing less work for better results. I mean, really, we are doing, and I say we, even though Benny's 15 and he really does everything himself anyway. I mean, I go, did you bolus, right? I'm never going to stop saying that, but he really does everything himself. And I got to say, it's the least amount of thinking that we've ever put into diabetes for the best numbers. I don't share specific numbers, but his predicted A1C is down almost a full point, and it was pretty good where it was. His time in range is up 15 to 18% of where it was the 90 days prior. We've been on Control IQ for more than 90 days now, so I can really see trends. It is remarkable. Individual results, of course, may vary, but to learn more, go to diabetes-connections.com and click on the Dexcom logo. A couple of cool stories to tell you about in Tell Me Something Good. Well, they're always cool stories, but these are really neat this week. I like how people are coming together here. So a couple of weeks ago, this is before everything really started in terms of the lockdown, a little girl in Wisconsin, she's a third grader, diagnosed with type 1 when she was just 2 years old. Her mom had heard about 3D printing for Omnipod covers. She'd seen something on Facebook and thought, wow, this would be really great. For my kid, I wonder if someone would do this. So she posted about it. Well, it turns out that not too far away, there was an 8th grade class teaching 3D printing, looking for projects. So these kids took it on. And I'll link up the story. It's really a well-done story. It's a 4.5 minute, it's almost a 5-minute news story. I worked in news for a really long time. I don't remember ever getting more than 1:45 to tell a story. So this is really well done. It's so cute. The photographer did a great job too. Wow, 5 minutes. I want to go work there. But anyway, they really did a nice job of figuring out how to do it. It was a lot of trial and error. You also see Addison getting the delivery. Her mom, Sarah Paul, really just being so grateful and talking about how nice this is. These kids made 21 covers, and they did everything to a ladybug, a Girl Scout looking patch, and a pink unicorn, which was Addison's favorite, she said. And what's interesting is that, of course, now schools are closed, and this teacher and the students have shifted, and they are now making face masks for healthcare workers. So a really nice story all around. Again, I'll link up the video so you can watch it if you'd like to. Also in Tell Me Something Good, this was really interesting. Aaron Kowalski, the CEO of JDRF, was supposed to run the New Jersey Marathon, a half marathon, on April 25th. And he posted on Twitter, I was supposed to run with thousands of people. Instead, I'll be running the course solo in New Jersey, but with T1D champions from around the world virtually. We are all running with T1D tomorrow to support JDRF. And then he posted all these people from really around the country, around the world, who were running with him. And in the Twitter thread alone, you had people from California, from New York, you had Georgia, Slovenia, the UK, Minnesota. I mean, you can go down. There were a couple of celebrities running with him if you scroll through this list and see his Facebook page. I just thought this was a really great way to show how people are continuing to do what they love. I guess people do love running. I'm not one of them. But to do what they love, to find a way to connect, right? That's the most important part. They were all doing this together, even though they were all separate, right? They had to do it on their own. So congratulations to everybody who did this. I know not everybody did the full half marathon. It doesn't matter if you did 1 mile, if you did your first 5K, if you did the whole half marathon with Aaron. I just think it was really inspiring to see. Do you have a Tell Me Something Good story? I'm still trying to focus on healthcare heroes, but I'd love to tell any good news stories that you have in the diabetes community. You can always reach me at Stacey at diabetes-connections.com. I'll be posting in some of the groups this week asking for your stories. You can post them in our Facebook group, Diabetes Connections, the group as well. It was announced recently that Friends for Life in July, the largest family diabetes conference in the country, if not the world, is going virtual this year. Not at all unexpected, but still remarkable to see them pivot and do this. I have no doubt it's going to be a fabulous event. They're actually getting more people than they would have in person. As you can expect, a lot of people who, wouldn't travel to Orlando in July might sign up for a virtual event. And I bring this up because registration is open. I do presentations there, so I'll be doing something. I got to tell you, though, I have an idea. I always do a game show. I do Wait, Wait, Don't Poke Me, which is a variation of Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me from NPR, basically a complete ripoff. But all the Zoom calls have me thinking, maybe I should do a variation of Hollywood Squares. Does anybody remember this? I'm not even sure I remember the rules. All I remember is circle takes the square, right? So I'm going to go watch the show. I'm going to find it on YouTube. I'm going to see if we can do a Zoom call Hollywood Squares. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. I find these things entertaining. All right. Coming up next week, the 300th episode. We are going to be taping that live, at least part of it live. We'll see how it goes. I really hope you take part in that. I'd love to hear what you were doing in June of 2015. I mean, gosh, it's really not that long ago, but Benny was so young. The technology was different. I mean, we're going to take a look back next week, so I won't go into it here, but I'm excited to kind of share with you what has changed. Okay, thank you so much to my editor, John Buchanan from Audio Editing Solutions. And thank you all so much for listening. I'm Stacey Sims. I'll see you back here next week.
Diabetes Connections is a production of Stacey Sims Media. All rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.